In the USA in 1992, 89% of energy came from unclean sources that produced greenhouse gases such as CO2. Figure 2 shows the carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuels since 1751. Clearly, a sharp increase is seen since about 1950, but how has this carbon dioxide increase been affecting the atmosphere? Figure 3 shows a clear increase in temperature anomalies since about the 1950s when a clear increase in carbon dioxide emissions was seen. Clearly, these two are connected. Electrons move randomly in order to increase stability. However, gaps between molecules can cause a loss of these electrons. A modern-day silicon solar cell is shown here. This solar cell uses the semiconductor silicon and enables a p-n junction. This contains p-doped silicon, which has positive holes, and n-doped silicon, which contains negative electrons. When photons excite the n-doped silicon, excited electrons fill the electron holes, which causes electron movement, which is the basis of electricity. Although silicon solar cells have proved way more efficient than a traditional dye-sensitized solar cell, or DSSC, DSSCs are much cheaper to make, and if efficiency improves, it could be on appliances used every day. The components and layers of a dye-sensitized solar cell is shown here. The most outside portions represent the fluoride tin oxide glass. The white dots are the titanium dioxide, which are responsible for carrying the electrons over to the glass, which transports the electrons over a wire, producing electricity. The red dot surrounding the white dot shows dye molecules who contain anthocyanin. The most efficient cells to date have used a ruthenium dye. However, raspberries have also proven to work quite well and preserve efficiency. When these molecules get excited using the photons given off from the sun, they release an electron which is transported to the glass by the titanium dioxide. The redox electrolyte also plays a huge role in the cell by keeping the cell running. Once the dye molecules give off an electron, the redox electrolyte is needed to supply the dye with another. The cathode is also responsible for supplying electrons to the iodide, which have now combined into 3I. The cathode plays a huge part in the efficiency of the cell because it is responsible for keeping the electrons moving around the cell. The cathode used here is a platinum cathode, which is proved to have the most efficient outputs in the cell. However, platinum is very expensive, and graphene or tin could be an alternative. So how does a non-platinum counterelectrode affect the dye-sensitized solar cell? Wang found that the use of graphene oxide, which has a 3D-like honeycomb structure, had a much higher incident photon to converted electron ratio than those using graphite. This means that more electrons were converted in the more synthesized graphene oxide than the more graphite-like structure. This can be explained by the fact that because of its packed structure, graphene oxide is better at holding on to its electrons. Wang compared the voltages of the different counterelectrodes, such as two types of graphene, hard and soft, graphite, and platinum. He found that of the 4 different counterelectrodes he used, the hard synthesized graphene structure actually produced the most voltage, however had the second smallest cell life. Using his synthesized carbon allotropes, the hard carbon proved better than the average graphite and platinum counterelectrodes. The second graph, however, showed that the most voltage was produced by the platinum counterelectrode at constant photocurrent. This shows that platinum is still the superior counterelectrode. Kyoki compared the current densities between the solar cells made of a graphite counterelectrode and a solar cell using a platinum counterelectrode. Comparing the two, he found a larger current in the solar cell using the platinum counterelectrode than that of a carbon graphite counterelectrode at constant cell potentials. This shows that a platinum counterelectrode is more superior than that of a graphite counterelectrode.
Therefore, I hypothesize that a counterelectrode using tin, which has similar properties to carbon and is highly conductive, will match potentials of solar cells that use graphene. I predict that the tin counterelectrode, which will be attached to the FTO glass by hydrothermal means, will increase overall efficiencies and assist cost to production ratios.
My experiment will be split up into 4 groups. The first group will use a graphite counterelectrode and a raspberry die. The graphite counterelectrode will be added on using a pencil onto the FTO glass. 3 dye-sensitized solar cells will be made for this group. The next group will use 5 grams for a tin counterelectrode and raspberry dye. It will be added on to the fluorine tin oxide glass for 20 minutes by hydrothermal means at 130 degrees Celsius. 2 dye-sensitized solar cells will be made for this experiment. The next group will use 5 grams of a tin counterelectrode and raspberry dye. The tin counterelectrode will be added on to the FTO glass by hydrothermal means for 30 minutes at 130 degrees Celsius. 2 dye-sensitized solar cells will be made for this experiment. The final group will use 5 grams for a tin counterelectrode and raspberry dye. The tin counterelectrode will be added on to the FTO glass by hydrothermal means for 40 minutes at 130 degrees Celsius. All of this will be done on a hot plate.
Readings for each group will be taken using Logger Pro, and efficiencies will be calculated. Statistical analysis will be taken using one-way ANOVA and a post-hoc with a p-value less than 0.05. Statistical analysis will be run on IBM SSPS version 20.